It is award season once again, and this year the Academy has decided on what they consider to be the best 53 movies from around the world. Of those 53 movies nominated for an Academy Award, I've seen 52 of them, 98.1%. Now I'll talk about the one I haven't seen here in a few minutes. I can't tell you how frustrated this makes me. I'm such a completionist that it pains me to release this video before I've seen everything nominated. But currently that movie has no streaming date on the calendar, and it's not playing at the theater anywhere in my state. And I think getting this out before the Academy Awards is more important. Now in the next several minutes, I will do a rapid fire review / synopsis of those 52 movies I've seen, tell you which ones are must see and which ones you can probably skip. Starting off this review marathon with one of the top 5 most disturbing and sad and uncomfortable things I have ever watched. The war in Ukraine was terrifying before hearing and seeing firsthand accounts of the atrocities of that war. This is a must-see documentary, but not something I will probably ever watch again. Hearing kids talk about their confusion over why books are banned puts a nice and new perspective on that hot topic. As a kid, if an album had a parental advisory sticker on it, I had to hear it, even if I otherwise wouldn't have been interested in the music. Similarly, I think that banning books is going to make sure that more kids read those books. Tell a kid what they can't do and you can guarantee they're going to do that exact thing. So maybe banning books is a good thing? A heart-wrenching opening scene, and it features a great acting performance by David Oyelowo as he explores and tries to process the trauma of that opening scene. Arguably the funniest movie of 2023, it's also very well written, putting a spin and perspective on the current state of American racial politics. Jeffrey Wright puts on an award-winning performance, and the chemistry between him and the rest of his family feels very real. Sterling K. Brown is a great and grating brother/co-star. John Baptiste is such a likable guy. I loved learning more about him and his life and the trials and tribulations he's going through with his sick wife. I just don't really connect with the music that he creates. Now, I understand why people love it, but it just isn't for me. This one is a bit too long, but it is very well written. The acting of both the mother and son is incredible, but neither can live up to the acting performance of that sweet dog. Now, if you've ever wanted to know what a murder trial in France is like, this is the movie for you. It's a slow burn and it doesn't give you all of the answers, but it will keep you on edge the whole time. If the man in this documentary ran for office, I'd vote for him. I don't even care what office he's running for. He is stepping up to teach and lead members of his community to live a better life. He has stepped up and become a father figure to the entire community, who has been ignored by the government and banking industries. This has a surprisingly similar story to the Netflix movie based on a true story, The Bank of Dave. This is as good as advertised. While the Academy got it wrong by not nominating Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig, I'm still so happy at both the critical and the audience response to this movie. It is bright and colorful and has a wonderful message that resonates with people of all ages and all genders. The amount of corruption in the world is unbelievable. Now, sometimes it takes a pop star to call it out and rise up and try to make the change by running for office. And sometimes even that isn't enough. It's hard not to like Bobby Wine, even though he is halfway around the world. It's also crazy how many similarities there are to US politics. This is the one that got away. It played for a very short period of time in my home state of Kentucky, and I missed it. It has not popped up to stream anywhere, and the closest theater to me showing it is now 4 hours away. The movie was made by legendary filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki, who is considered by many to be the Walt Disney of Japan. He's now in his 80s, and a lot of folks think this may be his swan song, aka last movie. I imagine when I finally do see it, it's going to fall into the must-see category. I shamefully have not seen the Spielberg original, so this was my first taste of this story. Now, while I didn't love it quite as much as I wanted to, I liked it a lot more than I was expecting to. The sets and the costumes are so colorful and full of life. The songs are good, but didn't quite reach great territory for me. The final scene, though, it raised the entire movie up for me. One of the best and most emotionally impactful final scenes of any movie in 2023. The special effects and the creator are so well done. This is a movie that is plastered with CGI, but it looks so real that you don't really think about it being CGI. And I'm a fan of John David Washington, but I feel like he wasn't fully utilized in his role, even though he was the star of the movie. The way that this movie played out reminds me a lot of the flow of a AAA modern video game story. It looked good and the story was kind of interesting, but it also kind of felt flat, even though I can't put my finger on exactly why. A historical fiction about a horrible Chilean dictator and examines what the world would be like if he had been a vampire on top of being a dictator. It's a very interesting concept for a movie, but I did not connect with it at all. The over-the-top symphonic music and the black and white video made it feel pretty pretentious, and then when the movie ended on the word Finn, that was the nail in the coffin. It's technically a dark comedy, but I didn't find it funny. Pixar used to be unstoppable. Every movie became an instant classic. This one didn't break any new ground. Elemental is fine. It's well animated and it's cute and it's full of so many clever visual puns. My 6-year-old enjoyed seeing it at the theater, but she really hasn't mentioned it once since we left the theater. A very raw documentary about the final years of living with someone with dementia. The couple in this movie is so lovable. It's just heartbreaking to watch Augusto forget more and more about who he is, and to see his caring wife step up and take each new hurdle with grace and dignity. This one's a hard watch. A movie about flaming hot Cheetos directed by Eva Longoria has no right to be nominated for an Academy Award. Its only nomination was for a song written by Diane Warren, who seems to be nominated anytime she writes a song. I will say she has written some killer songs in the past. This to me is not one of them. But to my great surprise, I actually really like this movie. It's kind of a cookie cutter story, but the characters are all very likable, and there are quite a few funny scenes in it. It's not going to win any awards, but it's a movie that is good to put on when you want something to just cheer you up. It's a great underdog story. I never got into the swing of how this story was told. A mother and 2 daughters recount the story of their 2 other daughters who are no longer part of the family. Actors are hired to act out the family memories, but we don't see the finished product, we just see the rehearsals. Now, even though I didn't care for the way the story was told, I really got invested in that last 20 minutes when you learn where the 2 absent daughters have been, and that last scene may be the most haunting of the year. I've never been a huge Godzilla fan, until now. This movie is nearly perfect. It looks and feels like it came out in the 1940s. The special effects, top notch, and the story has so much more of a human element than most any other monster movie ever. The ingenuity of the Japanese people trying to take down Godzilla using the technologies of the 1940s was so much fun to watch. This one surprised me and ended up being one of my favorite movies of 2023. Do you know who this is? It's Helen Mirren. Now, I don't know that I've ever seen better makeup in a movie before. Unfortunately, the movie around the makeup was pretty forgettable. Kind of reminded me a little bit of that Tom Hanks movie Greyhound that takes you inside the strategies of war. But it wasn't nearly as good as Greyhound, and Greyhound was just okay. But between Golda and Maestro, I think about 1,000 cigarettes were smoked on screen this year. Whether or not this movie has the best special effects is up for debate, but it definitely has the most special effects. I've always been lukewarm on the Guardians of the Galaxy series, and my opinion didn't change here. That being said, I think this is the best of the 3 movies, and I enjoyed watching the characters yell at each other and found the humor both weird and charming, if a little bit predictable. And the visuals in this reminded me quite a bit of The Fifth Element. Alexander Payne just has a way to take a boring story and fill it with memorable, quirky characters that you can't take your eyes off of. Seeing Paul Giamatti navigate Christmas break with a bunch of spoiled rich kids and a heartbroken cook was just so heartwarming. I was very shocked based on the premise that this ended up being one of my favorite movies of the year, and I can see this being one I watch every Christmas season. This movie does not need to exist, and the score is pretty much the same iconic score that we have all known and loved since the early 1980s. Even though I don't think the movie would have made any splash at all if it weren't the continuation of a story we've been following for 40 years, it's always good to get back in the saddle with Indiana Jones one more time. The acting and the way that this story was told almost makes it feel like a documentary. It isn't, but it is based on a true story. This one was pretty sad as we followed a boy who's lived a troubled life but has a loving family as he goes through the prison system. 2 boys in the West African nation of Senegal decide to leave home and head for Europe to become pop stars. But they must travel across the Sahara Desert and through many corrupt nations and across the sea to get there. I loved both of the boys in this movie and found their journey to be thrilling. The movie features some pretty disturbing scenes, even though nothing too crazy is actually shown on screen. The sweeping landscape shots do a great job of showing the vastness of Africa. This follows the tried and true road trip movie formula. The movie leaves a lot of unanswered questions and is one of those rare movies that I wish was just a little bit longer so we could see what happened next. A small island is caught between China and Taiwan. There were a couple of cool camera shots, with the coolest being right on the poster for the movie. It was a mildly interesting story about an island most people have never heard of, but it didn't really provide much insight into the situation happening there. People are just horrible. I cannot believe that this is a true story, and from what I've heard, some of the worst atrocities weren't even mentioned in this movie. It's way too long. It took me 3 sittings to get through this, but it is an important story about a black mark on U.S. history that we just didn't learn about in school. The acting and set pieces are both incredible. It probably isn't one that I need to see again, but I'm glad that I watched it once. Of these short live-action films, this is probably the funniest one, about 2 guys who become unlikely friends while visiting a morgue. I appreciate it when a story is just a story and doesn't feel the need to tie in current world issues and social commentary. It is what it is, a cute story of an unlikely friendship. Did you know that Los Angeles provides all middle school kids with a free musical instrument? This is the story of the 4 people who repair those instruments. They come from wildly different backgrounds, but the passion for music and to help kids has brought them together to run The Last Repair Shop. Of all of the animated shorts, this was my least favorite. I didn't love the animation style, and I didn't really pick up on the story's symbolism. A lot of people seem to really enjoy this one, but it wasn't for me. A biopic has one job: teach me about the person that the movie's about. I watched this 2-hour movie full of incredible makeup, some of the best acting of the year, and more cigarettes than should ever be in a movie, and when it ended, I felt like I knew nothing about Leonard Bernstein. I laughed at the beginning of May-December when they were having a cookout and there were about 100 hot dogs cooking on a grill. I don't know why, I just thought it was funny. The rest of the movie did not connect with. It is about an inappropriate relationship between a young man and an older woman and how that relationship has impacted their lives, even 15 plus years after they got married. It was an interesting concept for a movie, but the way it was executed, it felt more like a Lifetime TV movie. The 7th entry in the near 30-year-old movie franchise did not break any new ground, but any movie with Tom Cruise you can guarantee is going to push the limits of stunt work and be full of energy and passion. This isn't one of the best Mission Impossible films, but it's still one of the best action films of 2023. If you want to hear 2 grandmothers in their 90s who share a bed, blame farts on each other for 17 minutes, this is the movie for you. Another movie that's just a bit too long, but features some great battle scenes and killer costumes and killer set pieces. I don't feel like I learned a whole lot about Napoleon that I didn't already know. It was entertaining enough. If you like historical dramas or war films, you're probably going to like this one a bit more than I did. What starts off as a typical animated movie eventually won me over. The character of Nimona is a bit intense and teeters on annoying, but as you learn more and more about her history, you start to sympathize with her quite a bit. I didn't expect to like this nearly as much as I did. Now, while it's nothing like Sea Beast that came out last year, I put them in the same category. Straight to Netflix animated movies that end up being way better than they should be. Now, speaking of Napoleon, this was written and directed by the mind that brought us Napoleon Dynamite. It stars Tim Blake Nelson as an old countryman retelling stories from his life. I found the storytelling mesmerizing and was not expecting the twists and turns that this short film takes us through. Of all of the animated shorts, this was the most interesting and entertaining. A story about a woman in her 60s who wants to be the first person ever to swim from Cuba to Florida. This is one of those stories that is stranger than fiction. Diana Nyad is both inspirational and also a complete nutcase. No one at any age should ever want to swim 100 miles through jellyfish-infested water. This was surprisingly good and full of heart. I'll admit it, Oppenheimer's a bit too long, you really have to be in the mood for it, and it's gonna leave you feeling really bad, but it is a masterpiece. From a technical standpoint, I cannot imagine a movie being any more well put together. I don't know how Christopher Nolan weaved together Oppenheimer's life out of order, filled it with dozens of characters, and it was still easy to follow. And I still love that Oppenheimer implied that Einstein was a moron. Another animated short that didn't really leave an impression on me. It was an interesting idea to animate the story on top of articles of clothing, but I didn't find the story that interesting. About 2 minutes into this, I knew I was going to leave sad and mad. I hate that stories like this have to be told, and I hate how common they seem to be. It is haunting and beautifully animated. I didn't do a full review of this because I don't think I'm emotionally mature enough to explain the complex nuances of the story. But what I can tell you is that it features great acting and a great story that focuses on a complex emotional situation that is handled with dignity by all parties involved. It's the story of a young woman's childhood crush who she hasn't seen in 20 plus years coming back into her life and having feelings for her even though she's now happily married. A quiet, insightful film about a man who loves listening to music on cassette tapes as he drives around Tokyo cleaning public restrooms and taking pictures of trees. There's very little dialogue in this, and a lot of the movie is just quietly watching this man clean public restrooms. It doesn't sound interesting or entertaining, but I found watching this almost like working on a Zen garden. Not much happens, but it just helped me clear my mind and focus on appreciating the little things. And man, Tokyo has got some really nice public toilets. I don't think I liked Poor Things quite as much as a lot of other people, but there is no denying that it's a unique movie unlike anything else out there. The concept of a baby brain being put into a full-grown woman feels like the setup for a B-horror movie. The way it's told in Poor Things, it's full of thought-provoking ideas told through the lens of an absurd sex comedy. This is another one of those movies that I'm not sure I fully grasped or understood. I love the concept, but I didn't care for the direction. Now, this movie needed 0 fisheye shots, but it featured about 200 fisheye shots. I also felt like it went a bit overboard on the sex scenes. I found the dialogue and turns of phrase to be very clever and funny, and the sets, costumes, score, and makeup all to be very interesting and unlike anything else out there. This is the live-action short that impacted me the most. I was blindsided and felt gut-punched by the end. An important movie about something that should never happen, but unfortunately has happened and continues to happen. This was much cuter than I was expecting. It's one of those movies that has no dialogue and doesn't need it. Everything is told through the character's actions, and as the movie progressed, it became apparent it was going to be a sad and bittersweet movie. It's good. Coleman Domingo had a great year between this and The Color Purple. I always enjoy learning about historical figures who made a huge impact that are not household names. I don't think the way the story was told lived up to the importance of that story. One of the most unbelievable and harrowing stories of human survival happened in the 1970s, and every few years a book or movie or TV show comes out to teach a new generation about that rugby team plane crash in Chile. It isn't even close. This is the best retelling of that story. It's intense and disturbing and shows the human will to survive. Every time I say I'm done with superhero movies, a new one comes out that just blows me away. Now, while this doesn't completely reinvent the wheel the way that Into the Spider-Verse did, it's as good as that movie and continues on that better than expected story. These new Spider-Man animated movies are some of the best animated movies ever made. This is the story of a teacher and her interaction with her students, fellow teachers, and the parents. It's very intense and well acted. It feels real. And even when you try to do the right thing and act with integrity, it can all come crashing down around you. The tone of this reminds me a lot of the great underseen movie Shiva Baby from a couple of years ago, where you're just on edge the whole time. Do you want to get mad? Watch this movie. When a young Indian girl is raped by multiple men in her village, the village unanimously agrees that she is at fault because she shouldn't have been dancing at that wedding and let those boys see her, and they think she should forgive the boys and maybe even marry one of them. This is the story of that girl and her father as they struggle to do the right thing through the legal system of India. I like this quite a lot. It's a story of two soldiers on opposite sides of a war playing chess by carrier pigeon. It is sweet and well animated. I think it's kind of a cop-out to put inspired by the music of John and Yoko on this, as that song plays over the credits, but it really has nothing to do with the story. I want to like Wes Anderson more than I do. That being said, this is probably my favorite thing that he's done. It's still way too quirky, but the story is inspiring, and it's short, and it's a feel-good story. And it was originally written by Roald Dahl of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory fame. Maybe that's why I liked this one. I get the importance of this movie. I get the analogy to the modern day political climate and how people compartmentalize things. I just did not care for the way it was executed. I would have preferred a traditional movie versus being a fly on the wall, just watching these people go about their normal lives while the screams of the concentration camp and the smoke from the furnaces happen right next door. And now you know which of those 52 of the 53 Academy Award nominated movies I think are worth watching. Please reach out and let me know what you think. Tell me what I got wrong. And as always, congratulations to all of the Academy Award winners.